Hi, I'm Eric, and this is Platform. This is a place where ideas are discussed and examined. Before we begin, we'll show you some bio on each of our guests. I'll be interviewing them one at a time, and we'll edit their thoughts into a final program. Please enjoy the lovely elevator music from our house band as we introduce each of our guests. Today we're going to talk about patriotism. My first question is, how do you define patriotism? And is it a good or a bad thing?
Well, I think most anything can be either a good or a bad thing. And there certainly is the good side of patriotism. You know, a person can be proud. I think being proud's not a bad thing. You can be proud of the abilities you came into the world with. You can be proud of your family of origin. You can be proud of your community. You can be proud of your nation. However, I think that mostly that sentiment in our culture runs amok and is used for less than ideal purposes.
Mm-hmm. Well, like what?
Well, I think a lot of patriotism is drummed up by our military-industrial complex side in order to rationalize or motivate military action.
Uh-huh.
Patriotism has changed over the years, I think, from love of country to maybe more inquiring of country to disdain of country. I think it's kind of swung in a pendulum back and forth to both disdain and love. So distrust and trust. Yeah. So, blind trust will almost certainly get you in trouble.
Oh, really?
Questioning our countries, I don't think it's bad. I think it's good. Yeah. But patriotism, I think, in essence, it doesn't really encourage you to question the country.
Right. Patriotism is sort of when you take it to an extreme, patriotism becomes chauvinism, which is an adamant belief that your country is better than anything else. Typically back in the 70s, it referred to male chauvinism, which believed that men were better than women. But originally, the term had to do with your national belief of your country being superior to other countries, and that gives you a right to impose your
How do you feel about it?
Culture on other countries. Well, that would sort of make patriotism into a gateway form of oppression, wouldn't it? Uh-huh. Once you get people who believe that patriotism is a great thing and that everybody should subscribe to it, it doesn't take much to convince them that they should be imposing their belief on every other country, which is sort of something that America was based on the idea of getting away from that originally. It seems a little ironic now that we've come full circle and, the colonization of the British Empire has actually become our legacy or inheritance.
To me, it's a kind of a tribal thing. at its heart. You know, we think of patriots in terms of a larger picture of the country, but basically it's very tribal to me. It's the group, sort of a group ethos that we all agree on and we like to champion as what our group is about. And in that sense, our country has patriots. And my kind of definition of it has changed over my life. When Gail and I were young, just got married in Southern California, patriots were people like the John Birch Society, flag wavers, who thought that what we were doing as a married couple, an interracial couple, was wrong, was un-American. You know, we should get out of the country for that reason. Now, I'm on the other side of that picture. To me,
how did that happen?
That's a really good question. The life trajectory that we followed from those 60s radicals that we were, sort of went through our son, who, as you know, became a naval aviator, spent a career in the military, and we began to see patriotism through his eyes. This idea of service to the country. He was a patriot in that sense.
Yeah.
And now here we sit in this crazy time where people want to destroy the Constitution, and here we are, these 60s radicals, defending the Constitution, ready to fly the flag in defense of it. So I feel like I've become the patriot now.
What motivates people to say, my country, right or wrong, or love it or leave it?
I just think that's a cultural inheritance of individuals that aren't using their cognitive processes. I mean, because obviously it's not true. No, I mean, yes, my country, right or wrong, is still my country, but right or wrong is a judgment call. It's not neutral. And if a person says, basically, they're taking the stance, I'm not going to make a judgment call, then that's just not using your intelligence. And I think there is cultural support for that. People grow up in communities and families that support that perspective, and so they take it on. But I think it's just unintelligent.
Yeah, I think that is purely ignorant. Again, it goes right back to blindly trusting, and I just don't think that's a good idea. I think that as individuals, we should always question: is this right? You know, does this feel right inside of my heart? Does this feel like a good thing? You know, to give that up to somebody else is just silly.
See, this is another thing. Patriotism only becomes instrumental in that moment when you're trying to convince people to do things that they know they shouldn't be doing, right? You have a patriotic duty. So in that sense, yeah, my country, right or wrong, means that your duty is to do whatever your country asks of you, no matter what it's going to do to yourself and no matter what you're going to do to other people. If you look at patriotism as being the political equivalent to religion, where the idea is to convince people that they have a duty to believe in their country as being superior to everything else. And in religion, they have a duty to believe in their God as being right or right or wrong. And my question has always been, do I want somebody protecting my human rights and civil liberties out of a sense of duty or because they know it's right? And if it's somebody who's doing it out of a sense of duty, then they've got an easy out. They can always stop protecting it anytime they want because they can decide that it doesn't fit in with their moral beliefs or their moral stance. The same thing with religion. If you have somebody who's supporting the belief in a certain God, they can find an excuse to do things that they know are morally terrible. I mean, you never see atheists going out and committing mass genocide.
That's true.
You just don't. Atheists don't have that need to support some obscure belief with no basis whatsoever. And people who are just good citizens don't go around invading other countries. Whereas people who are patriotic have a moral duty to do that, it seems like.
I think it's fear. I think the politicians who stimulate that behavior tell them you need to be afraid. Somebody's trying to take what you have away from you. And so you look at the other and say, you know, my country, right or wrong, or if you don't love the country the way I do, it's time for you to leave.
Dissent is the highest form of patriotism, is a quote from Thomas Jefferson. Does our political system discourage dissent and criticism?
Well, I think it obviously does. I mean, you look at a lot of the reactions to a variety of protests that have happened in this country, and the knee-jerk reaction of the police. So it obviously does, but I'm baffled. I am honestly baffled by it. I think about historically, there are some precedents of rulers that were beloved in terms of what they say about them historically, that the population really liked that individual or that program or that policy, and it seems to me you would get more allegiance with that kind of emotion behind your population than what we have going here, which is the sense that if you criticize or make noise, the system will come down on you, that whistleblowers are prosecuted, and that people who don't go with the flow end up with negative consequences. To me, that doesn't engender allegiance. So if it's counterproductive, why do most systems that have power utilize discouraging dissent? And the only thing I can come up with, and this could be way off, the only thing I can come up with is I have heard some people claim that people who seek positions of power are oftentimes frightened people. And that if that is true, then that would make sense of why they would come down on dissent.
People aren't encouraged to talk about their thoughts, especially if their thoughts are not aligned with common thinking or what's actually happening. So that's not encouraged. And because of that, I think that people have kind of shied away from speaking about politics. I mean, we're just told that it's not good manners.
You know, in history, when Thomas Jefferson might have been saying things like that, this was just a reflection of the fact that they were trying to get away from England and dissenting with the government that they were adhering to at the time. Apparently, Franklin had an interesting quote that was something along the lines that first responsibility of any citizen should be to question authority, which I think actually puts it in a more. The problem with the Jefferson, so-called Jefferson quotation, is that it makes it possible for your patriots to, you know, one year to claim that you have to do everything your government demands of you, and the next year to say, well, we dissent with the current government. We don't like them so that much. So our patriotic duty is to now point out that they're wrong.
I don't think so. I think at its heart, our system encourages dissent. I mean, that's what the First Amendment is about. Freedom of speech. I don't agree with you, President Biden, for this reason. I think I have the right to say that, and it's sheltered in our laws. To the point that I can disagree, if that's what dissent means. What I don't have the right to do is what has happened more recently, is to say, well, I don't agree with the election, therefore I'm going to now destroy the country so that I can have this guy remain in power. It's a different kind of dissent than the one that's enshrined in the Constitution. I think we distinguish ourselves from countries where if you disagree with the leader, you wind up in jail. I think we can disagree. and not feel like we're in jeopardy of being arrested or worse.
How has 9/11 changed patriotism in the U.S.?
I think 9/11 has obviously dramatically changed our view of patriotism. The whole sentiment, predominant sentiment of the 60s was not as militaristic, and then 9/11 happens. It's the first time this nation has been considered to be under attack, and I think it really stimulated a lot of patriotism and kind of reactionary political views. There is some information that says that the Patriot Act was crafted before 9/11 happened, and that as a nation, some of the political sentiment was that it would be good to have some kind of dramatic event that stimulates patriotism in order to support the agencies that are in place that have power. That's an argument that's certainly been made, and whether it's true or not, the fact is that I think patriotism has helped support some of what I consider the more questionable policies of this nation.
I think that it shifted patriotism maybe a little bit more towards nationalism. I would like to think that people became a little bit more aware of what other countries, maybe perhaps be a little bit more empathetic to other countries that are fighting wars on their soil. But that doesn't seem to have happened. It seems to have kind of gone the other direction, where it seems that it kind of led people to be more distrustful and instead of more empathetic. It was a terrible thing on a multitude of levels, but it was really bad for America. It shifted America in a way that was not positive, in my opinion. Fear and hate.
And getting on an airplane.
And getting on an airplane. But fear and hate. The fear of, just daily living, sitting down at a bus stop and somebody left their package there. Instead of being like, oh, excuse me, miss, did you leave your package? It's like, oh, don't touch that package. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it introduced this sense of living with fear for the very first time in America, as far as I know, daily. And instead of doing good deeds, being full of fear that would stop you from doing a good deed.
Now, I didn't live in America when 9/11 happened.
Oh, no, you didn't? Where were you?
I was in Germany at the time.
Well, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, because it was, for one thing, it was 4 p.m. 4:45. And
what were you doing?
At the time, I was taking a nap. It wasn't me, I swear. And
I could swear I was.
I have an alibi. I got a phone call from my girlfriend who told me to turn on the television, so I did. That was what was on television. And I was getting the German government reaction was kind of interesting because one of the first public statements they made was that they could rule out any involvement from Muslim people because the plot was obviously too complicated for the Muslim mind.
Oh, sure coming from the Germans.
This coming from the Germans who are known for their complex thought patterns. So,
wow, is that right?
Yeah. They didn't quite catch the irony in that, especially since the pilots had all been trained in Hamburg originally in a German school. So, yeah, just an anecdotal side of things. It gave our government the opportunity to do a bunch of things that they wanted to do that they knew were wrong. And this is the other point that I think is probably the most significant. Nobody ever demands that you be patriotic in the name of doing something that's good. We only are required to become patriotic when we go to war. And at that point, it's sort of like nobody ever screams out, it's a free country, when they're doing something good. It's a defense for doing something that they know they shouldn't be doing.
Yeah,
and patriotism, it works in the exact same way.
That day is hard to not forget. Everybody remembers precisely what they were doing on that morning, and watching the towers come down, televised for all of us to see, was hard. And our country changed in so many ways. I mean, things that we take for granted for now, we never had before. The security we go through when we fly, things like that. But in the sense of our country, it's made us become much more aware of who we are as a country and what threatens us, whether right or wrong, whether you agree with why we're being threatened or not. It brought us, for that very minute, all together.
Is there a connection between competitive sports and patriotism?
Ideally, patriotism, I'd like to look at it in its ideal that you're proud of, yourself, your country, your world, your planet. I mean, that's not a bad thing. But the competitive side of patriotism, the aggressive side, the dominating side, to me is not attractive, and that's what comes out around sports, it seems like. They aren't really connected, but that whole tying yourself to a specific group, in this case a team, has comparisons. I think that our species is built that way. I mean, it's pretty obvious to me when I look throughout time and all cultures. It's all competitiveness is hardwired. And I try to imagine any scenario where there's evolution in any context without competition, and I can't imagine a structure where that happens.
Oh, Jesus, I have no idea. I'm not a sports person at all. I lived in Wrigleyville in Chicago, and people would ask me, how about those Cubbies? And my stock answer was, I don't follow football. Just drive people crazy.
It's probably the most harmless form of patriotism. People can get up and get so worked up about how their sports team is doing, and they can put an awful lot of energy into it, and it's not going to harm anybody. And in that sense, it's great. And it makes it a very nice vicarious way of, it'd be a much less destructive means of making geopolitical decisions, wouldn't it? It's sort of let's just decide who gets to make the big decisions based on who has the better soccer team or fencing team.
Competitive sports to me has always been sort of the substitute for war between groups. Let's have a football game rather than shooting at each other, kind of thing. And there's always this kind of we do this and we watch them competing on the field, and we cheer our team as kind of a substitute for other kinds of aggression. Okay, in its distant past, let's say, and until recently, we just watched games. We didn't have flag raisings at the beginning of them and sing the national anthem. B-1 bombers flying over and all that, and that's become kind of a weird addition to it.
Yeah.
It's always been true of the Olympics, because at the end, the winners stand on a platform and they play the national anthem of the country from the heart of it. But that wasn't true of all the things we do within our country: baseball, football, hockey, all that, basketball.
That's true.
But it's become that now. It's become kind of imbued with nationalism. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, by the way. I don't think I'm not sure it's bad.
Yeah.
I love the fact of the military being honored on the sports field. I like that.
Do you have any issues reciting the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh yes, I don't. I draw the line. I draw the line there, and that's been true ever since I've been relatively a young person. I stopped being motivated to say the Pledge of Allegiance in teenage years. And I always feel still to this day, when I end up in a context where the Pledge of Allegiance is being said, I still feel self-conscious and awkward not participating. It's not like I enjoy taking a stance or making a point.
Just feels awkward.
It just feels awkward. That I don't want to do it feels awkward, but I'm not going to participate just to be part of whatever's going on.
It doesn't feel good, you know.
To say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I know.
No, I'm totally with you.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel good. I don't want to pledge allegiance to a flag that is doesn't always reflect my views or my beliefs or my values. So it's hard to pledge allegiance to something like that. And I think that that's okay.
The Pledge of Allegiance was written by a socialist in its present form, except that he didn't put in the under God part. That was added sometime in the 50s. Who was it? Sinclair Lewis famously said at one point, when fascism comes to our shores, it will be draped in the flag and carrying a cross. Which then Sarah Palin posed for a photograph, draped in a flag carrying a cross, which was an interesting choice in terms of campaign strategy.
She's still around.
It's a little scary, isn't it? But, you know, when Abbie Hoffman draped himself in a flag, it just pissed people off. So these things change from one day to the next.
It was written in 1892 by a guy named Bellamy, who wrote it as a little ceremony that kids in schools would do. And the original ceremony he envisioned was, and it was essentially the words we use now, been modified over time with the addition of under God, which wasn't in the original. But the kids would stand, and they would do a military salute, and they would say, "I pledge allegiance," and then they would say, "To our flag," like this, and hold their hand up like this. And they did that until World War II, when it looked too much like this. And so they stopped that and started doing this in World War II. I don't have a lot of trouble saying it. I think we all stand, we do our thing, whatever we do, take our hat off for wearing a hat. It doesn't bother me. I think it's a unifying kind of statement that we can make as a group when we're all together in a room or in a football stadium or something. It doesn't bother me that much.
Do you think that after the aliens arrive, we'll have a different attitude toward patriotism?
I mean, to me, all life should be supported, you know, whether it's a tree or a human or a little green person. And in the most ideal sense, that is something I could conceive of happening. But realistically, I think that whole concept that we were talking a few minutes ago about people in power perhaps having a lot of fear, I suspect that would show up in a large percentage of the population.
How?
And then fear leads to
Fear of the outside.
Fear of the unknown, yeah. And then that leads to feelings of patriotism and then aggression.
The assumption is that people from outer space are doing so from a position of war, an invasion. So we're already basically planning.
We have a space force.
Yeah, we're not even open to the possibility that they might just be showing up for vacation. Better golf courses.
No, you mean extraterrestrials, right? Yeah, because right now the aliens for a lot of people are the ones coming over our border looking for help. You know, because they're, depending on whether they're coming from Norway or South America, there's a big difference for some people. But if it's extraterrestrials, I immediately thought of the movie Independence Day. I don't know if you saw that one. Yeah, you remember that? What happened in that movie with the aliens, the extraterrestrials who were coming to destroy our planet? All of a sudden, everyone in the world was a patriot of the world.
There you go.
There was one scene in it where Israeli and Arab pilots are flying together against the aliens, and they show them planning their missions together. And it's like to really dramatize that even these people now
Yeah.
can talk together and fight together because they're threatened by the same extraterrestrial enemy. So it made everybody a patriot of the earth. So yeah, it would change if the aliens that came were actually threatening.
Well, you know, I do believe that aliens came and fucked the monkeys. So so here we are.
Okay. I'd like to say thanks to the participants and to you, and to you, and to you for watching.
Shaka